Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to do a quick midweek update of this week in cannabis. Now, before we jump in, all I ask is that if you learned something, you enjoy this video, please leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel, and I do appreciate it. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this opportunity, I recommend subscribing so you don't miss any new videos. But to get caught up to speed and educate yourself, I would recommend going back and watching episode 2 and 3 of Reality Check Cannabis in 2020. It's a series I made, but that covers U.S. multi-state operators and Canadian LPs, and then you can watch episodes of This Week in Cannabis leading up until now, as I've covered sort of what we expected into the election, what happened, and the potential catalyst until reform. So main thing to point out is that I thought last week was a buying opportunity. This week was the real buying opportunity. But it's important to think like, okay, we're in the last week of February now. Next week is March. But then we have in the second week of March, Curaleaf announcing their Q4 fiscal year earnings. And then we'll have Green Thumb and other MSOs in March too. So this, in my view, is a great lull period to try and average down and buy the dip if you can. Because fundamentally, you can look at the markets and charts and get worried, or you can look at the facts on the ground and just see that everything we needed to get the ball rolling happened, right? So it's important to look at the fundamental factors and, your underlying plan as to why you're invested, and look less just about the day-to-day momentum, because that's going to distract you and take you away from, the underlying goal. So it's just important to focus on what matters, and that is New Jersey governor signs bill legalizing cannabis. So the deadline had been on Friday, and it was pushed to Monday. The cleanup bill got on his desk Friday, and Monday, by the end of the day, like literally before the deadline, he signed it. So this is it's awesome news. Obviously, it speeds up the process for New Jersey's market. Now, it's still going to take time for them to implement, but the main thing is we just needed this to be signed and put into action in order to allow New York to feel that they need to hurry this up, because, of course, they were intending to do it, especially if New Jersey were to go first, because for whatever reason, politicians like to follow other politicians, right? But this is just great. It's gotten the ball rolling. The deadline was on time. It's not like New Jersey's going to have to be delayed till next year or anything. This is what we want. So this is awesome. And at the same time, the New Jersey Attorney General orders cannabis cases to be dropped following legalization bill signing, which is huge, because there was a lot of talk in how I think still 6,000 people had been arrested in New Jersey this year for cannabis arrests, which is just insane. It's just like so confusing for cops, and I don't know why cops would even be wanting to waste their time on that anyways. But this is just what you want to see with progress. And people want everything all at once. It's not that easy, though. It takes time. But with the bill signing, now we get these convictions dropped. So all of these people who've been arrested this year, can take a deep breath like that. And this is a huge development. So the new Attorney General, Merrick Garland, says, quote, "Feds shouldn't waste resources on cannabis enforcement in legal states." Yeah, no duh. And that's exactly what New Jersey had been doing. Just like it's very confusing in the state of thing, or in the state of having, the federal laws and the state laws. So Joe Biden's pick for Attorney General on Monday said it's not useful use of limited resources to go after people who are complying with state cannabis laws. And Judge Merrick Garland, whose views on cannabis policy had been largely unclear to date, says that the issue in question of prioritization of resources and discretion. And yes, of course, with limited resources, you have to put them in the right places. And putting them in the wrong places is just a waste. We know that, right? So you can read more details here, but just want to point out that this view is consistent with policies put in place under Obama, known as the Cole Memorandum. And the Cole Memorandum says that states where they've legalized should be... they have immunity from federal prosecution, because why not? If you're telling the states do what you want to do, then they should not have fear of federal prosecution if they change it, right? But that Cole Memorandum was rescinded by Jeff Sessions, Trump's attorney, right? So not that any federal laws or policing has actually been done on these companies and states. I don't think a lot has, but just to point out that, this backwards notion that Jeff Sessions kind of allowed to happen, Merrick Garland's bringing it back, or he's reversing it at least. And this is just, again, coming from the Attorney General, who's the main judge, this is massive, Biden's pick. So that's big. And New York governor reveals amendments to cannabis legalization plan weeks before the budget deadline. So just to go through this quickly, because I've covered this one a lot, there's a new penalties provision, a new cannabis delivery amendment, and social equity revision. So those are the main 3 points that they went through. And, again, the main thing I want to, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but their deadline is April 1. So we have a date. April 1 is when we can try to expect New York to get legalization done. And even the top Republican in the New York Assembly said in December he expects it to get through this coming session. So again, we just need New Jersey. That was big to happen on time. And again, it's a politician just saying that he's going to do something and sticking to his word, nearly in his 4th term almost. But this is big. So let's just hope that by April 1, we have New Jersey to hold accountable now, or sorry, New York to hold accountable. And this is great news coming out of Atlanta. Dozens of companies applying for 6 Georgia medical cannabis licenses. From nearly 70 applicants, 6 companies will be chosen to begin manufacturing medical cannabis oil for Georgia patients. Now, again, Georgia has no legal cannabis for adult use or medical, so this is a step in the right direction. And ultimately, what we want to see is just states moving towards being more cannabis friendly, whether it's, just with oil in the beginning and then with flower. But it announced this month that it will review proposals and award licenses. And the winning companies will be providing medicine for 14,000 registered patients. So again, this is just an example of how another state you start, but over time, as you get going and you have more states to go off of, you can definitely see, the positive benefits start to come sooner than later. Now, this is just what's fascinating. Constitutional ban on legal cannabis advances in Idaho, whereas, the governors or the politicians, the government in Idaho thinks it knows what's better for the people than the people, which... mind-boggling to me in that sense. But let me just point out what the governor says. When drugs are legalized that are currently illegal, it increases healthcare costs and crime. That's just an opinion. There's no fact behind that at all. When he just says when drugs are legalized, we'll try to be specific. Cannabis is clearly safer than alcohol, tobacco, coffee, even a lot of these other things. Said the resolution sponsor, Republican Senator Scott Grow, condemning both recreational and medical cannabis use. This is about money. It's not about for caring people who might have pain and sickness. This is just an absolute false statement. This guy has no idea what he's talking about. That's it. But he thinks he knows better than everyone else. And that is the slippery slope in the wrong direction. So again, I would just get the hell out of Idaho if I could. But just to point out, these opposed to medical cannabis is needed, those opposed say medical cannabis is needed for residents suffering from chronic pain and terminal illness. Yeah. So Dan Zuckerman, medical director of St. Luke's Cancer Institute, said dealing with over thousands of cancer patients over more than a decade convinced him of the efficacy of medical cannabis in helping with pain and nausea. We know this. It makes suffering easier to deal with. So regardless of how bad you're suffering, you can feel at peace with it. How amazing. He says, I've seen it with my own eyes. The data is clear that patients benefit from this, right? So just imagine that. You have a doctor who's worked with treating patients and seen this work with his own eyes, but then you have the politician saying, no, this is just about money. When clearly you would imagine that probably some other big industries might be lining his pockets and keeping his position or keeping his narrow-minded set on that right track. You know what I mean? But nonetheless, as I mentioned in previous, or I guess it was Sunday's video, I listed just a bunch of states that are seeing, positive moves, and North Dakota's House has approved their cannabis legalization bill. So it does have to still go through the Senate, but it did get through in a 56 to 38 vote. And again, just a step in the right direction. We're heading there, and this is just positive news. Cannabis legislation proposed in Maryland legislator. I do believe I covered this or brought this up last week, but the bill that is an important step to actually making change happen has been introduced or proposed. So again, a step in the direction. Whether you announce that you intend to legalize cannabis, then the next step is to actually create the legislation for it and push that forward. So great for Maryland, staying on track. Now we've got Vivian Azer, who is, I believe she's with Canaccord Genuity. I forget, slipped my mind, but managing director. Anyways, let's hear what she has to say. And this is sort of relative to what the two talking heads mentioned on This Week in Cannabis on Sunday, and what I've mentioned. Just so we're having another expert in the industry give their state on what they expect and what they see as the current situation.
Why are the Canadian cannabis stocks up so much more than the U.S. ones when the positive developments on regulation has been here, not in Canada?
You said it so well. I think it's really a function of liquidity and access to the investment. The U.S. operators trade on junior exchanges in Canada, which makes it harder for retail investors.
Yeah, a lot of people that just don't know they exist, and that's the truth.
Democrats in control of the Senate. There's this hope that will lead to full legalization. When do you see that happening? Is there a timeline in place?
We're not looking for full legalization, though we are looking.
And see, I just want to point out that's interesting because, of course, yeah, I want to see full legalization. Why not? Just for the people that have had to spend time in jail multiple years, for the people that have convictions, right? But sadly, in the business world, the culture, they're not looking for legalization yet. They're looking for legislation changes that are going to make it easier for investors to make money. So that's just the sad truth of, what the culture wants. But I just want to point that out as I want legalization. I want to be fair. Sure, I enjoy making money, but I fundamentally want this for humanity. So I just wanted to point that out. But see, they're not adamant on legalization for the ultimate, the change in the personal freedom and the descheduling. It's more about money, which is also another reason why I think this, there's no doubt that this is happening. It's just a matter of when it comes. So anyways.
for incremental progress under the 117th Congress. What we're looking for is a modified version of a piece of legislation that was proposed last term called the States Act, which really just kind of pushes down rulemaking to the states. That would have material implications, though, for the U.S. publicly listed operators. We think it would change the tax code in a very beneficial way by eliminating 280E. We think it would provide access to commercial banking and insurance.
She's with Calvin, so I just got to point out what her picks are: Tilray and Aurora Cannabis. Out of the Canadian companies, you're going to pick Tilray, not a free and Aurora.
And we do think it would allow for relisting onto the U.S. exchanges.
That's interesting because without full federal legalization, the financing tools for these companies are really limited, right? They have to go to the debt market. Curaleaf had a debt facility just yesterday, a yield of 19%. We've also seen more SPACs in the marijuana space. Do you see that continuing?
I mean, the cost of capital does remain high, which is one of the key benefits to the operators for the safe banking component of the States Act. I'd also, remind your viewers that there is a separate piece of legislation, the Safe Banking Act, that did pass the House a couple of times last year, though we would hope to see bigger progress in the 117th Congress.
And that's what we've been promised, that there will be progress. But initially, going into this year, we had the MORE Act, which would deschedule and decriminalize cannabis. And then we had the Safe Banking Act, which would allow companies to uplist. They stop paying that 280E tax, and they can open accounts with banks. And then we had the States Act, which was to just allow states to make their own rules without fear of federal prosecution. So now, with the Democrats, they're talking about creating a new formulated bill, which seems to combine the States Act and the Safe Banking Act. The States Act in the MORE Act, in a sense, and then the Safe Banking Act. So that's where we sit. We still have the Safe Banking Act as a potential standalone sort of legislation, but then we also do have what the Dems are saying they're formulating into the States Act, and they're taking the States Act and the MORE Act and creating something new with it. So that's what we have to go off right now. But again, lots of catalysts still to come. And the MSOs, the first ever U.S. cannabis ETF, surpasses $1 billion in assets under management. Now, this was an article I found this morning that I just brought on here, but I wanted to share it just because if you look, when it was launched, MSOs launched with $2.5 million in assets under management, which means, $2.5 million have been given from people who wanted to invest in this industry. And it's grown to over $1 billion in less than 6 months after its inception. So if that's not writing on the wall, I forgot to even, I meant to search the growth from 2.5 million up to $1 billion, but that's unbelievable exponential growth, right? So that is the whole, clearly people see this opportunity. We're actually going to see more money being raised kind of thing. But I just want to point out that Harvest Health and Recreation announces divestiture from North Dakota assets. So although we did see that North Dakota did just actually, they are moving ahead with legalization, which is good. What this tells me is that local operator acquired Harvest 2 medical cannabis dispensaries located in Bismarck and Williamston, North Dakota. The dispensaries were sold for an immaterial amount of cash. Following the sale, Harvest no longer has operations in North Dakota. So just imagine, they anticipated to get into North Dakota if things in North Dakota made it easier for them to build up their businesses, but things fell through and they just have not made it that simple. So what you see is Harvest sort of selling what they own there and getting out. And again, it seems like they didn't get much cash for it, but this is just an example of, hey, look, we wanted to get in here, things didn't pan out, so we ended up pulling out and hopefully didn't lose too much money on that. But that's part of what's going to happen as business try to get in new states and these states' regulations evolve, right? Now, just want to point out Liberty Health Sciences shareholders overwhelmingly approved the acquisition of Air Wellness. So this one will go through with no issue when the deal is pended to go through, but that's again just Liberty Health Sciences shareholders are very happy with this overall. Curaleaf Select Brands expands into Utah, and I just wanted to point this out because, well, like Idaho, Utah is very against cannabis or non-cannabis friendly. Mind you, in Utah they do allow the sale of CBD oil. That is still legal there. So Curaleaf, taking advantage, gets in there with CBD. So America's #1 cannabis oil brand is now available in 17 states, including Utah. So again, just to show that regardless of what you might hear talking to people, America's #1 cannabis oil brand was acquired by Curaleaf in February 2020, is now available in 17 states. The number's likely just going to keep going up as people start to educate themselves and realize that, CBD and THC have very valuable medical benefits. And just on the topic of raising money, Green Thumb has raised another... Oh, come on, don't crap out on me now. Here we go. Green Thumb has raised another $56 million, selling approximately 1.6 million shares in the U.S. At a price of U.S. $35.50. So again, this is, it appears U.S. investors, so in the U.S. So what this means is that U.S. investors are like, you know what? although we could risk prosecution, we're going to take the risk and we're just going to get in now because we feel like this is the best time to get in early before people realize this opportunity. Isn't that fascinating? And I mean, that's sort of how investing in business works, right? You want to get in where you think it's undervalued. So this just goes to show the confidence that Green Thumb really has. They've been raising money like crazy. But again, the whole point is to raise money now so that you don't need to do it in the future and you can use this money, put it into the business and grow it. And although it does dilute shareholder ownership, still fundamentally good for the business and their long-term growth. Now, I did find this resource as well on Weed Stocks, and this talks about medical sales in Florida. So just want to point out, though, qualified patients now in Florida is up to 495,000. And I believe, last time I checked, I remember looking at this, it was close to 300,000. So just the growth is exponential, very fast paced there. And just as you can see, Trulieve is dominating in Florida. Now, this is as of February 12th and 18th. So they only had 75 dispensaries then, but look at the amount of medical cannabis, low THC cannabis, and flower that they're selling just ahead of other. Now, again, Curaleaf's doing well, Liberty Health Sciences, Columbia Care, MedMen, GTI's in there, One Plant, Cresco just bought them, Harvest. So a lot of companies are in there, but it goes to show that Trulieve taking a different approach and going very heavy in one single state, definitely did it well. And so just goes to show that there's the, try to get into as many states as possible, but also try to get into one state with a lot of people and dominate. That's also an approach. So just wanted to show this, many great resources that I keep finding, so I'll keep trying to pull them up. But this one from Cresco, I love it. They have investor teach-in sessions on their website. So you can literally learn about the craft cultivation at scale, so what they plan to do, how they cultivate, and the U.S. cannabis state markets. I watched these last week. I recommend it. Very helpful. Just wanted to point that out because it's education that helps everyone. Now, good news, pedaling back to Canada just a little bit before we end. Aphria's subsidiary, CC Pharma, announces major European supply agreement. So Materia Deutschland has entered into a commercial supply agreement with CC Pharma, which is the distribution company that Aphria owns in Germany. So without a doubt, a lot of Aphria's revenue comes from CC Pharma, which is not cannabis related. It's distribution and it's lower margin than cannabis, but nonetheless, you want to own a big pharmacy distribution chain when Europe is on the tip of, medical legalization, right? I think that's a good play long term. And so a wholly owned subsidiary of Aphria to distribute its high quality Aphria branded flower products across Materia Deutschland's pharmacy network throughout Germany. So they're getting in from one pharmacy network into another pharmacy network. Under this agreement, CC Pharma will import the batch release of the products, and Materia Deutschland taking responsibility for pharmacy sales and fulfillment. So no number, values, or anything like that given there, but this is just, again, a great update, and progress is being made in Germany, which is great for Aphria because I just thought Germany was fundamentally the best European market to try to get into long term, and they keep executing in that sense. Oh gosh, I apologize, my computer is so slow. But Aphria and Tilray announced launch of Aphria-Tilray-Together.com. So if any of you are curious about more information on the merger, please visit this site, Aphria-Tilray-Together.com. It explains all of it for you, all put in one place, and it seems as if they are pleased to announce that the regulators have approved the merger. So it's just a matter of antitrust clearances received and transactions remains on track to close, which is great. Just want to point this out, though. Remember how last week Eric Delorier of, I forget the Callum something, he mentioned that Canadian LPs are going to need to dilute in order to get into the U.S. and really compete long term. They're going to need more cash to keep up with, again, an example, GTI raising another $56 million. Canopy filed a base shelf to sell up to 2 billion securities. So this is dilution by $2 billion again. I've not checked pre-market or anything, so I don't know where Canopy's at, but essentially this could see Canopy's share or market cap just decrease by $2 billion because you're adding $2 billion of debt basically onto their balance sheet. And just want to point out that in 2018, August 2018, when Constellation Brands invested 5 billion Canadian dollars cash into Constellation Brands, overnight, their market cap went up by $5 billion. Why? Because they got an investment of $5 billion. So that's how that works, right? It adjusts the market cap. But now that Canopy you'd hope that they wouldn't have spent all the money Constellation Brands gave them, and you'd hope that they would be able to manage with their pending transactions of Acreage and TerraSend. But I guess Canopy did not manage their money well enough, and this is what we're seeing. Yeah, from $5 billion cash forward to having to raise money again. This is not great. And again, this is the main reason why I stayed away from Canopy. So just interesting to connect the dots, how he mentioned that last week. And again, we see Canopy, the biggest, the one we would least expect to diluting already. And Village Farms International advises that Texas greenhouse operations continue uninterrupted and announces timing of fourth quarter and year-end conference call. So we will get this from March, or from awesome. VFF on March 16th, but this was something that popped into my head. I wondered if their Texas facility would be damaged, and it appears it's uninterrupted, and water supply and recent power outages, water supply shortages have been experienced throughout many parts of the state, but it does not seem like their facilities have been affected, which is very good news for Village Farms International's shareholders as well. Now, just to point out, this website, newcannabisventures.com, is a great one for up-to-date information on U.S. multi-state operators, also Canadian LPs, but just up-to-date news. So I would just recommend checking this out. If this is not some site that you, as a self-direct investor interested in the cannabis industry, if you don't visit this site every so often, definitely one worth checking out. Because it's all right here for you. You just have to go newcannabisventures.com. And then last thing, another great resource from Free Cash Flow on Twitter. Now, I realize once I pop this up, it's not going to be as clear for you. It might, I don't know, but in past videos. But this one goes to just Tier 1 cannabis operators, the top ones, Tier 2 cannabis operators, and this is all in the U.S., multi-state operators, and Tier 3. Now, there's a plethora of the Tier 3 companies that are high risk, high reward, but it goes through their share price, their calculated market cap compared to their enterprise value, their book value right now, how much debt they have out, their stores open versus the stores that they have in possession or licenses in possession, therefore stores that they can potentially open in the future. Then we've got their revenue estimates for this current year, 2020, 21, 2022, their EBITDA estimates for this year, 2021, 2022, their estimated revenue growth from 2020 to 2022, their EBITDA margin estimates from 20 to 2022, and then calculated enterprise value divided by sales, and calculated enterprise value divided by EBITDA, telling you, what multiple their share price is currently trading at to their 2021 and 2022 sales, and their projected EBITDA numbers in 2021 and 2022. So if you have any questions about all of this, please let me know in the description. I'll try to answer my best, but this is an amazing resource, and I was using it last night to go through, and I'm still debating because, hey, if we have more pullback this week, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I sent $2,000 from my checking account into my TFSA to potentially buy more Cresco Labs, if it falls below my average price. Also potentially to buy more Vireo. I've just been looking through this and debating. So I just want to point out that we do have 2 weeks until Curaleaf is going to announce their earnings. So without a doubt, depending where you're looking, there's plenty of cannabis news, and folks, we are on the right track, so I wouldn't be worried about the pullback that we saw this week. Again, it's the perfect opportunity to buy the dip because all the underlying factors are there, and we can see them. It's just a matter of waiting for all of the catalysts to come and happen. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. If you enjoyed that, please leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or what you think is going to happen. But we're closer than ever, folks, so hope you enjoyed this. Have a great week, and we'll see you on Sunday. Take care.